travaille ensemble pour vous donner la chance d'écouter les candidats en personne durant les élections. Comme tout a changé depuis le début de la pandémie, notre format a dû changer aussi. Our in-house audience is limited to campaign volunteers and a couple of media. Tonight's event is streamed live with Your TV and being recorded for rebroadcast. I want to thank the team from Your TV for helping us make this happen. Now I would like to introduce you to the Chamber's Executive Director, Greg Petersma, who will also be this evening's moderator.
Thank you, Shannon. So, candidates, the format for tonight's meeting will be as follows. Each candidate will be given 5 minutes to make an opening statement. Following the opening statements, I will pose a question and provide each candidate 2 minutes to answer the question. The candidates will then be given 1 minute to provide a rebuttal if they choose. Following the questions, the candidates will be given 3 minutes to provide closing comments. All of tonight's questions are based on questions submitted by the public. Initially, we had hoped to have a couple of voters here in person to ask their questions. However, in the end, to maintain social distancing rules, we were unable to have them here in person. I want to thank the more than 30 people who took the time to send us questions for this evening. The rules for tonight's all candidates meetings are simple. Respect all involved and wait until the moderator acknowledges you before speaking. Before we get started this evening, the candidates drew numbers to determine their speaking and seating order. So to introduce our candidates, starting with Dennis Moquin of the Liberal Party of Canada, Jeannie Warnock, the Green Party of Canada, Eric Duncan, the Conservative Party of Canada, and David Anber, the People's Party of Canada. So welcome, candidates. So let's get started with our opening remarks. Candidates, you now have 5 minutes to make these comments, and we will start with Dennis.
Well, thank you, Greg. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, chers amis. Et un grand merci aux chambres de commerce pour cet spectacle ce soir avec les candidats. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and putting this special evening together for the candidates. And I can tell you that it looks like it's been very professionally done. And again, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this election is going to be for future generations. Future generations that are looking to have the opportunity to buy a home, future generations to be able to move to Canada without any discrimination or without any concerns, future generations that want to breathe clean air and be surrounded by greenery, future generations without discrimination for the lifestyle that they choose. That has to be looked after. The COVID-19 concern caught everybody off guard. I know the response from the federal government, in some opinions, was not so good. But overall, the small businesses and people in general who needed to put food on the table and have some type of security with their family members through this terrible, terrible time was in fact taken care of by the federal government. The concerns continue. I've spoken to small business owners, seniors, young people, and they all have the same message that we need to be aware of what their concerns are. I have been involved with people's concerns and people who need direction at times for the past 45 years. My experience is very well used, has been used. I'm going to travel all four corners of the riding. I'm going to meet with people, listen to people, listen to their concerns, because I know there's a lot. And I'm asking the people to send Dennis Marquin to Ottawa as their representative. I feel that I'm prepared to, I'm ready to serve, and it's a tough time for everyone. But on September 20th, I'm hoping that the citizens, the voters of Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, put the X beside my name and send me off to Ottawa. Thank you, Greg.
All right, thank you. So our next candidate to speak tonight from the Green Party of Canada is Jeannie Warnock.
Good evening. Thank you for organizing this event. And actually, it's quite nice to be seeing people face to face after all the restrictions of COVID. I really appreciate all the efforts put into this to make sure it's safe for everyone and to accommodate as many people as possible. I also want to thank the frontline workers whose tireless efforts are what have brought us to this place where hopefully we're starting to move out of the pandemic. And finally, before I start, I just would like to recognize that we're holding this meeting on the traditional lands of the Iroquois Confederacy, the Haudenosaunee, and as well as the Huron-Wendat. When I moved to Moose Creek as a teen, I can really tell you, I didn't expect I'd end up here in front of all of you, explaining why I feel you should vote for me and for the Green Party. I worked as a horse trainer when I was younger. While I did my PhD, I worked as a riding instructor. Then I've taught as a sessional lecturer at the University of Ottawa for over 15 years. More recently, I've invested a bit in the Cornwall housing market, purchasing and renovating a number of houses, so I'm quite familiar with some of the issues of this area. So if you have to sort of sum me up, I'm a bit of a person of contraries. On the one hand, I could quote Shakespeare at you till it bored you, but on the other hand, I'm quite familiar with some of the East End parts of Cornwall and also some of the sort of posh Riverdale types of the West Side. So why should you trust me with your vote? Why should you vote for me, for Jeannie Warnock? And the answer is because I'm the one who'll act on climate change, and I'll also be the one who will advocate to make the health and well-being of our children and youth a central focus of our post-pandemic recovery. I'll also try to initiate steps to continue with the reconciliation process as set out in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission with its 94 recommendations. If you vote for the Green Party, you're voting to send a clear message to all political parties that climate change must be taken seriously. The other parties are doing little or cannot be trusted to initiate serious action on the climate crisis. The Conservative Party, it still has over 50% of the Conservative Party membership still does not actually believe that we have a problem. The Liberals are sitting on the fence. It's the Green Party that has the vision and the commitment to combat climate change and to meet the 60% carbon emissions recommended by the IPCC. That's what's needed to keep our climate, our temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. I'll also be a tireless advocate for children and youth. I've worked with children my whole life, pretty much. I'm one of 10 kids, And I'm the second youngest, so I've had a lot of time with as an aunt with all my nieces and nephews. Then I've worked with children as a volunteer, as a riding instructor, and also with young adults at the University of Ottawa. Helping young people fulfill their potential is when I'm happiest. And I think as we emerge from the pandemic, we have to have better access to therapy and counseling for youth to deal with the isolation and stress of the pandemic. The crisis, the problems were serious enough, and the pandemic has worsened them. If someone has a physical problem, they can get care relatively easily. But if you have a child who's developing depression, anxiety, ADHD as they return to school, it's almost impossible to get them care. The Green Party wants to set up a mental health contract with the rest of the country. And I think advocating for youth services, better access to youth services, particularly rural youth, should be the first step.
You have 15 seconds.
Tackling climate change then may seem like an impossible challenge, but transitioning to a green economy will not only help protect the future of our young people, it will bring them many opportunities. I hope to be able to share some of these with you tonight.
Thank you. And now representing the Conservative Party of Canada, Eric Duncan.
Good evening, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank your TV and the Chamber for putting this on tonight, albeit in an unusual format. It's good to get out with the candidates and share our ideas for the future of our country over the course of the next few years in the next generations. 22 months ago was the last time we were at the ballot box for a federal election. To say a lot has changed in that time would be an understatement. COVID-19 has affected our way of life, and our economic recovery and our health recovery are something that are paramount for our country and for our citizens. One of the things that happened as your member of Parliament over the course of the last couple of years and as a member of the opposition was making sure that at a time such as serious matters of COVID, going through a global pandemic, that we work with the government where there was agreement. You saw that for our support of different support programs for individuals and for businesses, but also at the same time you saw us put forward constructive ideas. For an example, talking about an increase for the wage subsidy going from 10% to our suggestion of 70% to keep as many people in their jobs as possible. When you talk about the emergency business accounts that have happened, the $40,000, then $60,000 loans, there were a lot of issues with the eligibility and criteria. We work with groups like the Chamber, we work with chambers across the country, and within Parliament to get improvements. While we agreed on a lot of programs and the need for doing that, I'm proud of our Conservative team for calling out some of the corruption and the darker parts of the pandemic. I think of the We Charity scandal of holding the government to account on that unfortunate deal, $200 million going to a former Liberal MP with sole source and very little oversight, and some of the efforts to reduce the strength and the ability of Parliament to function. We're here tonight and over the course of 36 days because Justin Trudeau decided to call an election in the midst of a fourth wave, in the midst of wildfires in British Columbia, a crisis in Afghanistan, and numerous other challenges at a cost of, again, $600 million. I believe a couple weeks in, many members of the Liberal Party in Ottawa are regretting calling this election. I'm proud that on day 2 of the election campaign, we showed Canadians that despite not wanting this election, we are ready for it and to earn your support. Canada's recovery plan is a positive plan. It's 165 pages, which is hard to summarize in a 5-minute opening statement, and even over the course of 2 hours tonight. But there are 5 points that we are hitting home day after day with a positive message for our future and what we would do if we had the honor of serving in government. 5 points to secure our future. Securing jobs. 1 million jobs need to be recovered in this country, and we have a plan for that. Securing accountability by creating a new anti-corruption law in Ottawa. Secure mental health, as has been mentioned here already tonight, real services, an increase in the healthcare transfers provided to our provinces to do the essential services and to fix some of the gaps that we've seen exposed because of COVID-19. Securing our country to stockpile essential products and make sure we can manufacture not only vaccines, but a lot of the essentials and items here at home, and to secure our economy by balancing the budget over the course of the next decade while making investments in areas we know we need to, like healthcare. I've been honored to serve here locally. There's a lot of work to do in Ottawa, but equally as important as Member of Parliament is being present in the riding and knowing the local issues. We have a lot of work to do, and a Conservative government, I believe, would be best capable to address those in the coming years. We need to protect our VIA rail service here in the city of Cornwall and in our region. We need to make sure that the Transport Canada lands, the beautiful lands along the waterfront in St. Lawrence River, are protected by making sure there's local decisions at a local level on their local future. We need to support agriculture and the opportunities it presents, and as always, stand up for supply management in the sector. We need to make sure we get our fair share of infrastructure. And when we talk about reconciliation with First Nations communities, we look no further than Akwesasne and the work that we do and need to do there, continuing to build better relationships and opportunities with the residents and the government in Akwesasne. I want to give credit to the candidates for putting their name forward. It's never easy to do in an election at any level. And I think at the end of the day, what you'll see tonight is that anyone would be well suited to serve as Member of Parliament in our community. I love what I do. It's been an absolute honor for the past 22 months, and I'm asking for your support to continue the work that we've started and to secure our future. I believe our campaign is off to a great start, a positive message, getting a lot of traction and momentum in the right way. Tonight we're going to talk about jobs, about housing, about tangible healthcare, and I look forward to how we could talk about who has the best plan for Canada's economic recovery. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now for representing the People's Party of Canada, David Anber.
Yes, thank you, Greg, and I want to thank the Chamber for this opportunity to speak to the constituents of Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry. Now, you may not know this, but both of my parents are teachers. And growing up at home, my parents were constantly teaching me things, and not just academics, but values. I came to understand these not only as values that were important to my family or my community, but Canadian values. For example, they taught me the expression, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." And through that, I came to learn about the cultural value of free speech. I also learned about the values of personal responsibility and humanity's endless quest for excellence that we do as either individuals, as nations, or as society as a whole. I learned about how this fundamental trait of being human, and as individuals, we seek to better our lives, not only for ourselves, but for our families, for our children, and for our children's children. I learned about how those who have good ideas can combine those ideas with hard work and to build businesses, and that those businesses can create an economy that gives all of us access to anything we could possibly imagine. And if it doesn't exist, if we've imagined it, this is just an opportunity for somebody to make that exist by creating their own business. And I learned that a healthy economy raises all people, and that technological innovation has propelled mankind into the 21st century. And finally, and not finally in terms of lessons that I've learned, but just for the examples I'll give today, I learned about the Canadian value that no matter where you're from, no matter what your family's history is, we all share a common Canadian citizenship, or for some newcomers, the journey towards citizenship. That Canadian value respects and cherishes diversity, but does not say that diversity is our strength in some kind of performative virtue signaling manner. Rather, the Canadian value embraces the interplay between diversity and the importance of unity behind our country, its history, and its symbols. Now, after 6 years of Liberal Party rule, I fear that we're losing sight of many of these important Canadian values. Instead of free speech, we have censorship, both in the form of legislation, bills like Bill C-10, and in terms of cancel culture. Instead of personal responsibility, we see a government that wants to be making major decisions for Canadians, a government that sees your hard-earned savings as an untapped resource for it to use as it sees fit, a government that wants to coerce medical decisions, a government that doesn't think that people are capable of making good decisions for themselves. Instead of progress and a pursuit of excellence, we have a government that celebrates a religion of climate alarmism and wants to drastically change the way of life for people, families, and businesses in our society. And finally, instead of unifying Canadians, our current Liberal government divides Canadians along intersectional lines into various tribes, pushing all of the reasons why people in one group should doubt the good faith of people in another group. None of this is the Canadian way. This is the Liberal Party way. The PPC and the Conservative Party are the only two parties who want to hold on to important Canadian values and reject the Liberal Party way. But listen to me now and hear me later. The difference between the two parties, the Conservatives and the PC, is one of those parties only talks the talk but does not walk the walk, while it is the People's Party of Canada that sticks by their principles even when they're difficult principles to stand by. I was very involved in the Conservative Party of Canada since its foundation in December of 2003, and I'd been a proud member of that party. I didn't turn my back on that party. That party turned its back on me when for the past 18 months, the party had precious little to say over a number of the anti-science and pro-fear positions taken by the Liberal government in its approach to the pandemic. The party had even less to say about when and how we would be returning to normal, something that a majority of Canadians would like to see. That party turned its back on me when it began to resemble only a slightly more right-of-center version of the Liberal Party, advocating for things like carbon taxes. I moved over to the PPC because that is the only party that I have seen that when challenged on its ideals, stays true to those ideals. Maxime Bernier, since his days with the Conservative Party, has advocated free markets, free speech, civil liberties, and Canadian unity. Those are the things that I stand for, and if I'm elected to Parliament, those are the things that I will champion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, candidates. And just for those that may be wondering at home, we do have 5 candidates that are registered to run in this riding. We have 4 in front of you tonight. The 5th one, representing the NDP, Trevor Kennedy, was unable to make it. So let's start the questions. Candidates, you have 2 minutes to answer each question, followed by an opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal. The first question. Balancing the public good and individual rights is often a challenge when implementing government initiatives. The issue of vaccine passports brings this issue to the forefront. How would your party approach balancing the public good and individual rights when it comes to vaccine passports? And we're going to start with you, Jeannie Warnock.
Okay. The Green Party is very much a party that's based on the science and on evidence. And the evidence is that the vaccines work and that the vaccine passports will help us return to normalcy sooner. So we live within a community, and we have to take the responsibility of looking after our fellow Canadians. So, you have to balance the right, on the one hand, of individual rights with the rights of the community and the burdens we place on the public health system when we're not vaccinated. So while our party at the moment does not support the mandatory passport, I personally do support it, and that's something that I would advocate very strongly with my party, because I believe there's no justification for not implementing the passport.
Okay, thank you. Eric Duncan.
So I want to try to separate this into 2 different aspects when it comes to vaccine passports. I think there's an international use of the federal government and what we require. For an example, somebody who would be looking to go to another country this winter, and that country requiring proof at a national level of vaccination. We've been on the record as a Conservative Party of saying we do need to have something as life gets back to normal. If another country requires that and somebody wants to travel there, we need some sort of national system. It needs to be efficient, it needs to be simple, and it needs to be, I think, not a boondoggle, for lack of a better word, as we've seen many federal programs become over several years. The other aspect is when it comes to domestic. Our party does not support any national mandates or national level directives. What's happened throughout COVID, which I believe has been an appropriate thing, as opposed to an Ottawa knows best and one rule across the country when it comes to vaccine passports, for example, it is the jurisdiction of a province and or local health units to make determinations on restrictions locally. I think when you explain the difference between the two, there is strong support for an international proof of vaccination for people, Canadians, to be able to leave the country and go somewhere in the coming months. And I think domestically as well, when you explain that it's the right of individual provinces. Things aren't the same in Cornwall as they are in Toronto, as they are in Vancouver or in rural Newfoundland. And I think it's up respecting our jurisdictions, what the federal government controls, what our provinces control as part of our Constitution, I think needs to be maintained. The other thing I'll say is on mandatory vaccinations. At a federal level, for federal public service, for an example, we believe there's a common sense approach. It's individual choice. I strongly encourage people to get vaccinated. I am fully vaccinated, but it's individual choice. But rather what we can do is we can embrace technology and the productivity we've seen with rapid testing in workplaces to get people back to work, respect individual choice, and at the end of the day, start getting back to normal, back to work, and get our economy firing on all cylinders again. Thank you.
David Amber?
Yes, thank you, Greg. Right now, Canada has approximately 2/3 of our citizens are fully vaccinated. We should all be happy that we have had a very high level of vaccine uptake. But that needs to be separated aside from the issue that you've just asked us about today, that being vaccine passports. I would have hoped that I would have seen all party leaders and all people running in this country, a liberal democracy, that we would stand shoulder to shoulder on the idea that nobody should make any decisions for anybody's healthcare choices except for that individual, for whatever reasons that are important to that individual, and that should be the end of the matter. This idea of vaccine passports is animated by the idea that we need to get more people vaccinated whether or not they want to be. And that, to me, is something that cannot exist in a liberal democracy. We have a role of playing leadership, all of us here today and all of the party leaders, as to making the case as to why vaccinations are good. But at the end of the day, Greg, the decision as to whether or not somebody gets vaccinated must be that person and that person's alone. And it should not be legislated, and it should not be coerced indirectly through the form of requiring someone to be vaccinated if they want to participate in civil society. It's quite simply this. If vaccines work, then there's no need to be concerned if other people around you are not vaccinated. And if they don't work, a vaccine passport system is just simply untenable. We heard from Eric that there are some jurisdictional issues, and that is true. But at the end of the day, the first thing that comes before the jurisdictional issues is we all need to take a stand in favor of something that is so fundamental in a liberal democracy, the autonomy of an individual in making their own medical choices.
All right, thank you. Dennis Moquin.
Great, thank you, Greg. I'm not sure that the term vaccine passports sits well with the people in Canada. I'm not sure that that's the proper wording. Passports kind of scares people sometimes. It's already in Quebec. It's already being used in Quebec. They set out their guidelines, and they are in place. It appears to be ready. It appears to be viable. It appears to be something that the people of Quebec are going to accept. Stemming on the announcement today by the Premier of Ontario that they're going to be looking into and implementing the vaccine passports. The federal government is promoting a vaccine. Get your vaccines. It'll save lives. It'll keep everybody healthy. I believe the most success with this vaccine passport program would be left with the prospective provinces, as Eric was mentioning. I think the province can guide, and they have the pulse of the respective people. What's good for people in Cornwall and area would not be the same in the province of Quebec or out west. It's an individual choice for sure. I'm understanding now that businesses and governments are satisfied that vaccines work. They're going to make it mandatory in the workplace. They're going to make it mandatory for people and a condition of employment down the road. If they're required and they work, then everybody needs to get vaccinated. And the term vaccine passport, I don't want everybody to be afraid of that word, but that might be better served in a different approach or a different way of explaining it, pretty much. Thank you, Greg.
Okay, thank you all candidates for answering the first question. Does anybody wish to offer any additional response? And I'll start with you, Jeannie.
So is it 1 minute or 2?
You have 1 minute.
So yes, actually, I would like to just quickly address David's observation and his shock that anyone would consider accepting a vaccine, so-called vaccine passport or mandatory vaccination. I mean, we live as individuals, but we also live as a collective. As an individual, I don't like having things imposed on me, but as a collective, I accept that I have responsibilities within my community to do some things that I may not like and that I may find an infringement on me, but that I'll agree to for the benefit of my whole community. And a mandatory vaccination is just exactly one of those things. We need to encourage vaccination because our health system can't support even small numbers of serious cases of COVID. So, you know, whether we like it or not, it's a communal responsibility that I accept.
Eric?
To build on that, I think it's great that all 4 of us are saying that vaccines are safe and people should get them and encourage them to do that. I think that's great. I think one of the things we've seen and I found concerning over the course of the last couple of weeks of the campaign is, for an example, the Prime Minister going out and using rhetoric that I find is more divisive and not helping. In Calgary at an event was yelling and screaming into the microphone about the unvaccinated. The other day I saw a clip of calling them those people, referring to unvaccinated, and I think that is no way to show leadership in terms of encouraging people to get more, vaccine rates higher. I think we could accomplish both at the same day, which is reasonable and it's pragmatic. We can have individual choice and respect, encourage people to get it, but again, when it comes to federal workplaces where we have a jurisdiction here in a federal election, in a federal campaign, is we could put rapid testing measures in place. We can keep people safe, we can move forward in the pandemic, and we can get past this. And I think it's that type of leadership and reasonableness that respects rights, respects getting back to normal and keeping people safe, why our campaign's getting some traction and resonating across the country the past few weeks. Mature leadership.
David.
Part of the reason, Greg, why we find ourselves in the mess that we're in is that we've been constantly bombarded with fear, exaggerated fear, such as the claim that if even a few cases of COVID end up in the hospital, it will overwhelm our systems. Right now, with Ottawa, I'm using Ottawa as an example, that's where my hometown is, there's 2,400 hospital beds, and 10 people are in hospital with COVID right now. There's, I think, between 6 and 10 Delta variant cases that have been identified in the last week. With the levels of vaccine uptake we have right now, we are no longer in a situation where we are in a pandemic that is putting us with our backs against the wall, as is being suggested by some. Right now, we have many people who are vaccinated, and those who do not want to be vaccinated should be left alone.
Okay, thank you. Dennis?
I strongly suggest that the well-being and the health concerns of everybody dealing with this monster of COVID needs to accept the fact that vaccines work, vaccines are the answer. Everybody that you talk to has had a family member or somebody close to them that's been affected directly by the COVID deal. I think, again, the passports are a way of a minor way to control. I do understand the frustrations, and people don't like to be told what to do, and I understand that. That's their right. But I think if they were able to run that,
10 seconds.
if they were able to run that parallel with what you need and what the direction is, I think if people understood that, they would be more apt to accept the passport.
Okay, thank you, candidates. So we'll move on now to question 2. The shortage of, excuse me, goodness. Even the second question shocks me. And I know what the second question is. The shortage of all types of housing in our region is well known. The impact of this shortage has led to escalating rental costs, a spike in the cost of purchasing a home, the creation of homeless camps, and exacerbating the lack of employees for businesses. Is housing a priority for your party, and what steps would your party take to alleviate this shortage? And I'm going to start with you, Eric.
Thank you. Absolutely, it is a priority, and I think over the course of the last 6 years, we've had a federal government under Justin Trudeau that has said they have spent billions of dollars. They've allocated dollars. Whenever we look at the realities of the situation through the parliamentary budget officer, they actually leave a lot of the money on the table. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, government intervention or lack thereof in certain areas has created a housing crisis in this country, I think that's been unparalleled in a very long time. Home ownership and the reality of it for a lot of Canadians is further away than it's ever been before. And I think people are fed up with the status quo and have lost trust. We have a full detailed plan because we understand that housing and people being able to afford a home, affordability is a key issue, inflation is a key issue, and we have several planks in our platform that address that. For an example, I think when we'll talk about jobs and creation, labor and materials and the housing sector are a major issue. When we talk about jobs, which I'm sure we will later tonight, that is a massive factor in terms of getting more housing built. We've committed to building and having a plan to work with the private sector, provinces and municipalities to build 1 million new homes over the course of the next 3 years. Supply is going to get us out of this issue, not tens of billions of dollars in government spending. It is going to be supply from the private sector, both from a home ownership and a rental perspective, that'll make a big difference. A key issue, and again, I'm not going to suggest there's a lot of foreign buying necessarily in the Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry market directly right now. There is some, but it is a major issue in cities. We need to ban, not tax, we need to ban foreign buyers from into the residential market and instead direct that investment into market rental housing. We have a detailed plan for mortgages, for building houses, for working with provinces and getting more dense housing built in different cities. When you look at the city of Cornwall from an economic perspective, housing is at the top of the concerns in terms of our economic potential. So it's the core of our campaign, it's the core of securing our future, and there's a lot we need to do. The last 6 years hasn't worked. We need a change, and we believe we have the best plan to provide that.
Okay, thank you, Eric. David.
Thank you, Greg. Obviously, affordable housing is something that anyone who's involved in politics would care very much about for their constituents. But unlike the Liberal Party approach, which would be to throw money at it and to try and take over the responsibility of the private sector, the PPC, I think, could be summarized in the following way. First, we have a tax plan, a simplified tax plan that leaves more money in the pockets of middle-class Canadians. And that's very important in terms of affordable housing, is giving people more of their hard-earned dollars back into their pocket. But secondly, by stimulating the economy and favoring free market solutions, we allow the private sector to do their work and to increase the supply, as Eric was talking about. By increasing the supply, you create a win-win situation for home builders, but also the supply allows the ballooning price of houses to go down. I think the important thing is that while a PPC government would not have a closed mind to looking at roles that the federal government could play beyond those two things, we have to remember that it's not primarily a federal government responsibility, but we could certainly look at other solutions and look at working with the provinces as well.
Okay, thank you. Dennis?
Thank you, Greg. I agree with the affordable housing concern is out there. First-time home buyers are discouraged. Mr. Trudeau has gone on record to acknowledge and to show some concern with the guidelines that we are setting for affordable housing. They have suggested that we're going to look at probably 1.4 million homes. Those homes will be new-built homes, preserved homes, homes that will be prepared or at least repaired under construction. First-time home buyers are discouraged. The new rent-to-own program that is being introduced by the Liberal Party will stop some of those concerns. The bidding wars, no opportunity for home inspections, those are all issues that are veering their nasty concerns to us. And I strongly feel that this affordable housing will definitely be in the top 2 or 3 concerns throughout this campaign. And it needs to be looked at very, very closely. Thank you, Greg.
Great, thank you. Jeannie?
Okay, so the Green Party supports the creation of more affordable housing, in particular a focus on intensification in the urban core. They're also, in terms of the creation of housing, focus very much on making sure the new houses are going to be highly efficient in terms of heating. So that too will enable the housing to be more affordable because it'll be easier to heat. And then the other aspect we have to think of, so there's the new homeowners, but you also have to think of people who aren't buying homes, so affordable housing for people who rent. And that's a big problem in Cornwall. And I know that myself as someone who rents. And the Green Party supports ongoing rent control as we emerge from the pandemic. They support rent supplements. And they also support something which I think would help low-income people a lot, which is the guaranteed livable income. Because a lot of people's problems, like with housing, the people who rent, are based on the fact that they're on things like ODSP, and they just don't have enough money to live on. People on social assistance. So part of the reason for the housing crisis is that lower income people who need assistance are not being given enough at the moment by the government to support themselves.
Okay, thank you. Eric, do you have something you'd like to add?
Lots to talk about when it comes to housing, so yes, thank you. One of the things I will say to residents in our area is that one thing we will never do is tax capital gains on primary residences in the sales. That is something that the Liberal Party now is openly talking about, and I think will be absolutely disastrous for thousands of homeowners and people making housing sales in the coming years. It is very unpopular and not been well received. I just want to give, I only have a minute, but one of the creative things I think as well, we're going to have a lot of federal property and buildings left over as we switch to more work from home, both in the public and in the private sector. One of the things we've committed to as a Conservative government is taking 15%, a minimum of that. We believe we can do that now, is converting those office buildings into affordable market-geared renting or purchases for folks. And one of the other things, Greg, that we need to address that we haven't talked about is money laundering. Canada's laws and lack thereof in money laundering is making it a haven around the world for people to bring in illegal criminal activity. We need to crack down at a national level, get into the modern age of this, and get money laundering out of our system and in our real estate market.
David.
Well, Greg, I'm a criminal defense lawyer, and I could just say that money laundering, to the extent that it's a problem, is not creating the problem in affordable housing. What we just heard from Eric's comment there is that we have the Liberals over there who want to make new taxes and the Conservatives who say no new taxes. But the PPC takes the position that why don't we reduce the taxes and simplify the taxes that we have right now to put more money in your pockets and stimulate the economy in a way to allow the private sector to come up with a solution and not a top-down governmental approach.
Dennis?
Thank you, Greg. Just to add, concern, the Liberal government is also looking at discouraging foreign buying, foreign investments, buying up all of these properties. We would look at a 2-year hold on these purchases. The way that these housing deals are being handled is almost criminal in some form. And I think that the people deserve to have a better chance at resolving their housing and home issues. Thank you.
May I go? Is it?
So you've already had a chance to provide a rebuttal, right? Did I lose? Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead. Sorry, I apologize for that.
No,
Losing
just
track of where
to elaborate on our position, the Green Party's position, in contrast to the Conservatives, we do support a capital gains tax of 100%, as opposed to just 50% as it exists now. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is that because that would help stop some of the flipping, and some of these people who buy the houses, renovate them, sell them down the road 3 or 4 years later, because basically 50% of what they make on the flip is tax-free. And that's just not fair to all the other people who work hard and are taxed 100% on their income.
Okay, so thank you for your answers for our second question. So moving on to question 3, and we will start with David. A local priority has been to develop the waterfront. However, most of the waterfront in our region is still owned by Transport Canada. What will your party do to support local ownership for the purposes of development? And will you look at the jointly owned Portlands project as a potential divestiture solution?
Well, thank you for the question, Greg. I've actually been trying to get myself up to speed on this very issue since I was named as the candidate very recently. I think, like many of the solutions that the PPC has, it's by starting from good principles and reasoning through from there. The federal government should not be in the business of owning large amounts of land and property. And so certainly where there's a local interest, such as the one that Cornwall has in the waterfront property, I think that it makes more sense for land to be in the hands of the local government as opposed to, and in the hands of local people as opposed to the federal government. So certainly if I'm sent to Ottawa, I will be at the forefront of trying to negotiate that happening as best as possible. I will say this, I'm certainly not the most knowledgeable as it comes to this issue, and so certainly I plan to spend a lot of time getting up to speed on the intricacies of those negotiations so that I can be a good advocate for my constituents and also abide by what I think are the right economic principles, that the federal government simply should not be in the business of owning large amounts of land and property.
Dennis?
Thank you, Greg, for the question. Local land concerns has always been an issue dating back to my time on City Council. We have beautiful, beautiful property here in the city of Cornwall. And there was always an issue about who is going to promote it first, who is going to think of a great idea to use the land properly. I remember not that many years ago when there was talk about carnival atmosphere down at Lamrou Park and maybe condominiums overlooking the park. And this is all a municipal issue. I think that municipally they would reach the agreements and identify these properties. The municipal government would do the assessment because they will benefit from it directly. But always remembering that the municipal government and that contact with the federal government for any guidance or any assistance or financially, depending on the land, the Crown land and some of the government properties here, I, like David, would have to research because I've lost track of exactly where they are and who owns them. But municipally, with the help of the federal government, and I don't want to see any of those properties just be used just for the sake of being used. I don't want to see that at all in this area.
Jeannie.
So the waterfront plans, as far as I'm aware, consist of the 5 parcels along the river and with varying ownerships of each of them, which makes it quite complicated to address. But a number of the land is owned by the federal government or owned and rented at the moment to to Cornwall. There's also, I believe, a part in the Portlands that's owned by the Mohawks of Akwesasne. So as the Green MP, I would be advocating to our government to tell them that this is a great opportunity to take some of the steps for reconciliation set out in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This is the perfect opportunity to show our goodwill by continuing to partner with the Akwesasne Mohawks and incorporating a significant aspect of their culture, their history, their traditions in the buildings, incorporating their language in a prominent way on the signs and the buildings. And I would use this as my approach to persuade the government to work with our municipality, to work with Cornwall to develop the waterfront.
Thank you. Eric.
So the Transport Canada lands in the city of Cornwall are the single biggest opportunity we have, I believe, for economic development when it comes to a federal file. I know the file very well and I've been very active in it. The Seaway Management Corporation, the City of Cornwall City Council, Grand Chief Abram Benedict, and the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne, the Community Futures Development Corporation being involved. And Greg, as you mentioned in that question, the Portlands, just behind the cotton mills along the water, do present a very good template and way of going forward. I will say this, the land needs to be divested to local control for local decision making. We don't need a federal bureaucracy at Transport Canada in Ottawa or Toronto or wherever they may be making decisions based on the future of Cornwall. The residents, the City Council, and I believe the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne has expressed an interest. We have a template with the Portlands program of how that partnership could work. And I just say this to folks in the Cornwall area. We have a beautiful city here and I'm very proud of it, but one of the things that we don't have here is an example that speaks to the potential and what we need is there's not a single waterfront restaurant, for example, in the city of Cornwall. And we're probably one of the only communities, I'd say, that has waterfront access that doesn't have that. There is one in South Glengarry and in South Stormont with the Blue Anchor and the Nautica Grill, but that just speaks that's beautiful lands that needs to have decisions made locally. I'm very versed in the file, and I will just say the Liberal government for 6 years has been promising divestiture and conversations, and they have literally gone nowhere. Every month and every year that this issue does not move forward, that control comes locally, is another year that we miss out on economic development opportunities for the city of Cornwall. On day one, I will fight for this, and in a Conservative government, we will actually move the ball and get the job done to get local control of those lands in our area.
Okay, David, would you like to add anything?
Just briefly, I've already set out, Greg, my position and what the People's Party's position is on a market-based approach and an approach that does not have the federal government engaging in large ownerships of property. But I can say one thing, if I'm elected, one of the first things I will do, having heard about the importance of this issue, is to have a town hall here in SDSG, here in Cornwall, to hear from all of the interests that are involved and to take those interests back to Ottawa and make sure that the best decisions are made.
Thank you, Greg. As the progress keeps changing on the municipal approach and on the federal approach, I personally, as Member of Parliament for this riding, would keep encouraging the municipal government assessing and working with the Council of Akwesasne and the guidelines set out by the federal government. I personally have not seen that kind of communication. I think it's a good old-fashioned sit down. Let's see what's available. Let's see who's interested. And for the betterment of the properties, I think it would be easier resolved.
Thank you. Jeannie.
I would actually just like to ask Mr. Duncan one question. I know he just said.
That's not going to be part of tonight's format. The
Oh, okay.
questions, I asked the questions.
I will try to follow up.
And
No, I'm just wondering, we were told that from day one, our Conservative government would be so engaged in fighting to get local control over the waterfront. But I mean, my understanding was a few years ago, there was the issue with the storage tanks, and it was causing a lot of concern with the storage. There, I believe it was the Portlands, and I didn't notice the Conservatives doing a lot to try to resolve that issue or keep the storage tanks from being set up. Like the federal government went ahead and did as they liked.
okay, all right, thank you. Oh yeah, sorry, keep missing the last one. I can't count to 4 twice.
I'll look in there. So the reality of the situation is that the city of Cornwall was asked about the port divestiture program about 15, 16 years ago, and that time they declined to take it over. The Federal Transport Canada at that time had the lease. Here's the reality of the situation. It was a Conservative government that did work with the city of Cornwall and Akwesasne to divest those lands to local control and give them a future. So the reality is it was under a Conservative government where local control was given. The city and Akwesasne now own that land. But I'll go back between, Greg, the canal lands, opportunities for residential development, market rent, private sector, public sector, protecting recreational areas. All those decisions do not need to get made at a national federal bureaucracy. They can be done locally like we have with the Portlands, local control, local decision making. And we're talking a lot about economic recovery plans. These lands can play a big role in Cornwall's future, getting new homes, getting new businesses, balancing that out, and really being a key part of a recovery plan.
All right, thank you. So we'll now go to question 4, and I'll hand it over to my president, Shannon Lebrun.
Thank you, Greg. Si vous êtes élu, qu'espérez-vous avoir accompli dans Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry Sud en tant que député d'ici la fin de votre mandat? I'll repeat that in English. If elected, what do you hope to have accomplished in Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry as MP by the end of your term?
And we're starting with Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. beaucoup, Shannon. Au moins, si on peut finir le travail qu'on a déjà commencé ici au comté, ce serait mieux de prendre notre temps. It would be beneficial for us to take our time, finish the work that we've started. We have all kinds of conversation with these young people, avec le monde qui fait des décisions pour nous, for the people who make the decisions for us, is very important. By this term, au fin de la campagne, au moins le terme, si on peut continuer de travailler ensemble, if we can continue working together to get to this spot, to get to this area, if we can do that, si on peut travailler ensemble, I think we'll have some success. And pour nous, avec le Parti libéral, it's very important to stay on course, stay with the view that we're going to accomplish. On va finir la job au moins. On est capable. Thank you.
Jeannie?
The green tech and clean tech movement offers tremendous job opportunities to Cornwall's workforce, particularly its youth. So what I would hope to achieve in 4 years is to make sure that the St. Lawrence College and perhaps the River Institute as well is developing further programs that would teach our youth these specialized, have intensive specialized training in these programs so that they can take advantage of the green economy in the future and get these well-paying jobs. Another thing I would like to see, as I said before, is to make sure that there's a significant presence of the Mohawk language, their culture, their traditions in any form of riverfront development. And finally, I'd really want to make sure that the rural youth of our community and youth in general have greater access to mental health care. We don't realize it, but the advances in psychology and mental health have been tremendous over the last 20 years, and yet access has not kept up with that. So we have to make sure that our children can get the help they need that will allow them to go on and live a fulfilling and life and to contribute to our society in a meaningful way.
Thank you. Eric.
Merci pour la question en français. C'est une chance de pratiquer mon deuxième langue. C'est un travail en progrès, mais j'ai fait le cours chaque semaine avec ACFO localement parce que je connais qu'il y a une grande population francophone ici dans la circonscription et c'est aussi important dans la Chambre de communes avec des collègues francophones. Pour les choses localement, pour les questions, à la fin de le dernier et le prochain terme, 4 choses localement. Le terrain de Transport Canada, on juste parle de tout ça. Une augmentation de la service avec VIA localement pour la ville de Cornwall est très important. Le niveau de l'eau et la communication avec le niveau de l'eau et le sujet là dans le fleuve Saint-Laurent, c'est très important. Pas nécessairement ici à Cornwall, mais pour beaucoup de communautés à Long-Sault, à Iroquois. Et aussi, c'est très important pour l'infrastructure locale, localement. Je pense sur la rue Boundary, par exemple, à la ville de Cornwall, il y a un grand projet là avec un nouveau pont et une nouvelle infrastructure qui est nécessaire pour les communautés. Alors, mon travail, c'est national, oui, dans une plateforme, mais aussi localement avec les idées spécifiques pour les communautés de Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry. So just quickly to summarize in English for the Anglophone audience, local priorities, the Transport Canada lands, which we spoke about, increasing and maintaining our Via Rail service, which is federally run here in Cornwall. The water levels in the St. Lawrence River for folks west of Cornwall, which is an economic and financial concern for many, and a safety concern, and also local infrastructure. A perfect example is being an advocate for Boundary Road for an overpass improvement there that I think would be really important. So those are some examples I would love to be measured on if we had the honor of forming government. Thank you.
David.
Merci Shannon pour la question. La question a été posée en français, donc je vais commencer par répondre en français. La première chose, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, je veux avoir une réunion de discours et de discussions et de décisions à propos de le territoire à bord du lot. Deuxièmement, je veux à Ottawa poursuivre des démarches pour accélérer le retour aux vies normales après COVID. Troisièmement, je veux poursuivre les politiques économiques qui vont favoriser les individus et les petites et moyennes entreprises pour stimuler l'économie, pour aussi contribuer à le retour de vie normale. Et quatrièmement, je veux être une ressource pour tous les constituants de répondre aux questions, d'essayer de trouver des solutions et avoir des discussions. Et même si une solution, ce n'est pas une solution dans le domaine de gouvernement fédéral, de trouver une solution pour le constituant pour avoir le bon chemin pour trouver cette solution. So in English, just once again, as I mentioned before, one of the first things I will do as based on the importance of the issue as has been brought to my attention is to have a town hall with respect to the issue of the waterfront property and to take those issues, those ideas back to government to come up with some good solutions. Secondly, I want to pursue in Ottawa a return, or any policy that will favor a return to normal life. It's been now 18 months of 14 days, to slow the spread, and Canadians would like to return to normal as soon as possible, so I will be actively pursuing any and all measures at the federal level that will see us return to normal life. Third, I'm going to be pursuing economic policies that will put more money in the hands of individuals, small and medium-sized businesses, and help stimulate the economy, again, as part of the goal to come back to normal life. And fourth and finally, I want to be a resource to all constituents here to answer questions Even if it's not a federal government solution that exists, I'd like to discuss and engage with constituents to help them find the right solution. If not from me, point them in the right direction as to from where.
Okay, so Dennis, would you like to add anything?
Comme c'est là, on parle de position de député avec les partis libéraux. Maintenant, plus que jamais, il s'agit d'avoir une voix en Ottawa, une voix très stabilité. It's time for a voice for your concerns to go to Ottawa, show the stability, and make sure that the position of deputy MP is strong and bringing your concerns. Amène les affaires, au moins les mots de le monde à Ottawa. Je veux pas l'emmener à Ottawa ici. C'est le temps de voir un changement. It's time for a change. Ottawa's not coming to this riding. Let's bring this riding to Ottawa. Thank you.
Jeannie?
Well, I mean, each of us has presented what we would hope to bring to the riding, and I don't feel I should rebut anyone particularly, but I mean, in terms of overall approach, I would hope to bring a very pragmatic, a nonpartisan strategy, cooperating with all parties as necessary to advance my particular goals for the riding, which would be action on climate change, action on youth mental health, cooperation with the First Nations, particularly in this case the Mohawks of Akwesasne. And so, as I said, it would be a nonpartisan approach, willing to work across all party lines, evidence-based, pragmatic.
Thank you. Eric?
I've had the honor of serving in public life since I was 18. I got broke in gently, and I've been very honored to serve in different roles municipally and now federally. And to the line of what Jeannie had just said, attitude's a small thing that makes a big difference is a mantra that I've always used. To that point, when we talk about local priorities, I think it's important to have a strong voice here locally for two things. I think we've had a government here in Ottawa for the last 6 years that hasn't addressed the concerns and the priorities that we have. I think it's time for change, time for a government that we can get some results back here locally. I think when you look back of the 9 years, and I think of my predecessor, Guy Lauzon, who I had the honor of working with, we got the International Bridge, we got the Benson Center, we got the expansion of Brookdale, the wastewater treatment plant expansion, and the list can go on and on and on throughout the counties as well. And the reality is we have not seen that investment as attention to Cornwall in the area over the course of the last 6 years. I have a great working relationship with our municipal councils, our provincial counterparts as well, and I think it's part of that teamwork approach. That's what we have elections for at different levels, and I think people expect when you get elected, you can work with all partners to move the ball forward. I think I've demonstrated that in my municipal life in the last 22 months, and government or opposition, whatever they have the honor of serving in, I would continue to do the same.
David?
Sometimes in politics, it's all right when someone doesn't have anything to say, and I have nothing further to add to my earlier answer.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to question 5. The location of the supposedly temporary Canadian international border in Cornwall provides a significant social and economic barrier to the people of Akwesasne, which is in direct conflict with existing treaty rights. Will your party focus on the relocation of the Canadian international border and the toll booth? And I'm going to start with you, Jeannie.
Yes, we would. The Green Party supports reconciliation with the First Nations and working to ensure that they have the full opportunities equal to every other person in Canada. It's interesting that you asked that question, actually, because I was talking with someone from Akwesasne about a week ago when my son was swimming down at Avonmore Avonmore Beach. And he was telling me, yes, that it causes significant problems, and it's harder for people to go across there. Like, so it thwarts their economic development. It thwarts opportunities for them. Because they can't, there's no free exchange back and forth between Cornwall and Cornwall Island. So yes, I would support helping to lift that in order to increase the opportunities for the Mohawks on the island.
Eric?
Absolutely. I love the question because I think this is something that doesn't get enough attention. When we talk about reconciliation, when we talk about building a better relationship with First Nations communities, the port of entry, the location of the Canada Border Services Agency, the location of the toll, and the fact that there's a physical barrier that is disconnecting Akwesasne from the city of Cornwall, the United Counties and beyond is wrong. And frankly, I actually think I would say it's borderline discrimination, frankly. I've made that statement. This is not new to me. I've made that comment several times in conversations with the Grand Chief and Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. I've said the same thing to former Mayor, now Senator Bernadette Clément, and Glenn Grant, the new mayor in the city of Cornwall. I am working on building relationships with American counterparts because one of the realities is that it would be a co-location perhaps with the Americans, so the U.S. Homeland Security would have to be involved, and there are no conversations whatsoever on this subject at this time, and that needs to change. I think every single Canadian wants reconciliation. What that tangibly means isn't talked about enough. And when we look at locally, the port of entry location, the tolls in its location, is an issue and is literally a physical barrier to building a better relationship. I'll just say this for somebody that says, why does this matter? Who cares? If Riverdale or the community of Long Sault, if you had to show your passport and go through the CBSA office, or if you had to pay a toll to go to Riverdale or Akwesasne because they were on an island or separated, do you think we would accept that? And the answer is no. It shouldn't be any different with the First Nations community in a reserve. I will work locally. Local representation matters. We need to get that on the radar. It may not happen in 1 year, but I think it's a tangible thing for reconciliation that can make a difference in our relationship with Akwesasne.
I share Eric's view in terms of the idea that reconciliation involves us putting our money where our mouth is and not just talking, but actually putting into action practical solutions. And I think this is one of them. My background as a lawyer, I've run my own business since out of law school. And so as a small business owner myself, I've had to try and come up with interesting solutions to problems that on the face of it don't appear like they're easy to resolve. And so certainly I would like to try and find creative solutions for moving the toll and finding a way to allow the movement of people to be much more uninhibited. Having said that, it won't be me at the table with the American Homeland Security government engaging in these negotiations. So certainly I want to bring the voice of the residents of SDSG to the table so that whoever is going to be negotiating that on behalf of Canada with the American authorities is pursuing the right things. And certainly I don't think that Justin Trudeau would be the right person to be pursuing those types of negotiations. So I would do my part to try and bring forward the voices of everyone in the area.
Dennis?
Thank you, Greg. I agree, it's a great question. That Canadian international border crossing has been a concern for many, many years. The persons of Akwesasne, the community of Akwesasne, are entitled to have answers. I feel that they are being neglected when it comes to conversation. They're neglected when it comes to being able to identify the people who are responsible. The community supports the City of Cornwall, and they continue to support the City of Cornwall. Local shopping, sports, travel, construction. The concerns are strong. The toll bridge is obviously in the wrong location. It's not well suited to allow the community members from Akwesasne to enter and not being comfortable with with the back and forth. I think first of all would be to have the municipal members seated, as I think Eric alluded to, because it is the city of Cornwall. We're not talking about, you know, the Rainbow Bridge or Windsor. It's Cornwall, ladies and gentlemen, and that's our bridge, basically. Secondly, there is a provincial flavor that we have to look at, because Ontario has some guidelines and some involvement with, obviously, the municipality of Cornwall. And third would be the federal government will be involved. And as far as I'm concerned, long overdue. It's been a topic of conversation for a long, long time. And this is probably a great idea to concentrate on and get this done.
Okay, so each candidate will now have a minute. Jeannie.
So we've had our flags at half-mast now to recognize what happened at the residential schools and to acknowledge it and show our sorrow and our remorse for the terrible things that happened. And yet a week ago, approximately, Erin O'Toole, the leader of your party, tweeted, "Oh, our flags have flown at half-mast for too long." Similarly, when Stephen Harper, the leader of the Conservatives, was in power, he totally dismissed having an investigation into the murdered Indigenous girls and women. You know, it was totally off his radar. But now you're telling us, like, personally, that you'll do so much to overcome this. And I'm just wondering, how do you reconcile, apparently, your own support for the Mohawks of Akwesasne versus your party's clear indifference to them? And tweets like Erin O'Toole's, like, the flags have flown too long at half-mast. When are we taking them down? Like, I'm just...
Thank you. Eric?
Happy to respond to that. That is absolutely not the case in the tone of what the statement that Aaron had when he was asked the question about that. What I have said several times is talk and action are two separate things. We have a government in Ottawa right now that is the best in the business for making an announcement and saying all the feel-good statements right. They don't follow through and they don't act on follow-through on things. We have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission before us. We know what we need to do. What we have said and what I have said and our party has said, there's a difference between feel-good statements, pledges to act, and actually making a tangible difference. So to build, Greg, on the question that you originally asked of a local issue, gave a substantive answer. We're talking, when it comes to residential schools, of fully funding without red tape, without paperwork, closure for those families, reinterment, and actually, after 6 years of that report being done, way too many of those recommendations are sitting there. There's a difference between talking and there's a difference between acting. We are going to act and make tangible progress on these things, not consistently have these failures and apologize every time an election comes and saying, if you re-elect us, then we'll get to it. We'll deliver, we'll make difference, and that answer I gave in the first part about a local issue here in Akwesasne is proof locally, and I think nationally, that we mean seriousness when it comes to reconciliation.
David.
I think we're in agreement here that this is a good chance to actually put into practical motion some of the things that we talk about. So there being this agreement, I don't think there's anything for me to rebut or respond to, so I'll just stand by my earlier answer.
Okay, thank you. Dennis.
Thank you, Greg. As your MP, I will make it a priority to meet with the City of Cornwall and the City Council. I will include the conversations and the concerns voiced by the community members of Akwesasne, and I will bring the concerns and the conversations to Ottawa. And I'm not prepared to put a timeline on it, but it's been going on for so long that I am also happy that this question and this concern came up this evening, because it's been brewing for a long time. Need some action. Let's get it done.
Okay, thank you, candidates. We'll now move to question number 6. One of the biggest challenges we hear from businesses is the inability to find and retain all levels of employees. How does your party plan to address the labor gap in Canada? And what is your position on simplifying the immigration pathways for businesses? I'll start with you, Eric.
A lot to take in 2 minutes. I'll do my best to address that, Greg. We have talked and we have a full platform. The number one aspect is recreating the 1 million jobs that were lost in the pandemic. When I go and visit businesses, which I've been doing the entire duration of the pandemic, and going back as a mayor was not new either, but particularly during the pandemic and most recent last couple of months, businesses, their number one inability to get back at 100% and fire on all cylinders is they can't find workers. We also have an unemployment rate that is too stubbornly high, and it's showing that the status quo is not working. What we're talking about is being compassionate and being smart, winding down COVID support programs, and as we do that, invest in what we call a job surge. So a wage subsidy for businesses that come forward. If you have somebody that's been chronically unemployed through COVID and you are able to hire them at that business, we will give the wage subsidy there. That is a benefit to the person who is unemployed. It is a benefit to the business. It is a benefit to our economy. And when you speak to, again, we talked about housing, suppliers, contractors can't find the labor. What we're seeing right now is not an urgency to get a recovery plan and get going in place. So we've talked about doing that as a major tool to doing that. On immigration, it is an opportunity for us as a country. We have specific platform commitments in there about recognizing foreign credentials. You hear this, and I will say, for years and years, every party promises, for an example, a doctor that comes from Europe that comes here needs to redo or get stuck driving Uber or working at a job where their skills and their education is not valued and put into place. We're talking about linking those people together, modernizing our infrastructure, our immigration processes, and that also includes our infrastructure as well of making sure that we have housing for jobs. You talk to the City of Cornwall, you talk to Bob Peters, you talk to the Economic Development Department. The number one challenge for our industrial park is workers coming to our city and they can't find a place to live. We've got to get workers, we've got to get a better plan. The status quo is not working.
Thank you. David.
Greg, there were two parts to your question. I think one that sort of dealt with just the idea of employers and employees and keeping them working efficiently together. And then the second part of the question dealt with immigration. I'll just briefly address the second.
Immigration pathways for businesses.
Right, exactly. And I think I'll address that part first. I know that Maxime Bernier's plan, the People's Party of Canada's plan, is to have 100,000 to 150,000 a year of immigrants come to Canada, focusing on the right skills. And so certainly when we're rebuilding our economy, making sure that we are able to find those who are wanting to come to Canada with the right skills, being able to come to Canada and work with them to ensure that we've matched the employees with the employers. As it pertains to just the general part of the question though, again, as a small business owner myself, and I might sound like a broken record, but we don't need a program. We don't need a federal handout. We need simplicity and we need taxes to be kept lower. If taxes are kept lower, it gives small and medium-sized business owners the ability to be more nimble in terms of their operations, to hire more people, with different skills to fit the different areas of their business that they need. And so that's really what the PPC's economic platform's all about. It's about a simplified and lower tax plan for all Canadians. But those are the things that are going to help business owners, not some kind of cockamamie idea on how we're going to build a social program to accomplish these goals. It's just simply giving more money to people back in their pockets.
Okay, thank you. Dennis.
The labor gap for small businesses is a strong concern, and it's evident all across municipalities, the provinces, and basically across the country. The Liberal government will continue to look after small business concerns. They need representation. The small businesses need representation to bring that forward, and they need help in finding workers. The small business concerns are through a lot of areas. We've heard from restaurant owners, bar owners, construction people, service providers. Recently, the municipal, provincial, and federal governments have looked at this concern, have tried to work together. The biggest gap or the biggest area that nobody seems to have the answers to is just the offer of jobs, the offer and availability of housing, the offer of the health care, and the offer of services that are offered locally within the municipality. The small businesses had some original help from the federal government through the COVID pandemic, and that needs to continue. And I would encourage the small businesses to not give up on their concerns. Do not give up with the requests, and they need to have representation, and they need to know that soon we're going to have to find some workers to cover. Thank you, Greg.
Okay, Jeannie.
As a teacher, I guess I come at it from a slightly different angle. I focus less on how do you incentivize workers to go work at essentially uninteresting, low-paying, unrewarding jobs that, frankly, in the next 10 or 20 years will be increasingly mechanized. Instead, as you can see, for example, in places like Home Depot, grocery stores, like checkouts, like a lot of retail will be replaced by some form of mechanization. There's a lot of advances in robotics on farms as well. So rather than focusing, as the Conservatives are doing, on how do we get these people to go work at these boring, low-paid jobs that most people don't actually want to fill, I would look at it from the other angle, and I'd say, how do we take this workforce, which is so intelligent, it's so intelligent, it's bilingual, and how do we actually retrain them so they can have better paying, more rewarding jobs? And that's why we need to develop more specialized training and apprenticeships in colleges like the St. Lawrence College, and improve access, provide students with free tuition so they can actually get the skills and the education that they need to get a good job in our knowledge economy. Our world is based now on creativity, it's based on skills. It's not based on these jobs, these low-paying retail jobs that frankly are being fast replaced by machines.
Thank you. Eric, do you want an opportunity to add some to your answer?
Yeah, I think it gives an opportunity, Greg, to present a contrast perhaps between the Greens and Conservatives. There's dignity in all work. And when I'm out in the riding talking to people, a waiter or a waitress or a cook at a restaurant is a valued job that you can make a good living at. You can be a small business owner, you can work in retail, and there is a dignity to work. So connecting people back with those jobs, I don't think is any sort of offense you're not going to find me apologizing for. I think to the point where we can do things on apprenticeships. I'll give the province of Ontario very large credit of supporting more apprenticeships. We've talked at the federal level, we're going to double the apprenticeship job creation tax credit. There's value and dignity in work on that and providing opportunities to move up the ladder and do better for themselves. The other thing I was going to mention as well about innovation, I think of companies in the business park, Sigma Point Technologies, Ross Videos, and Iroquois. There's a ton of untapped potential where technology can give a boon to support the hundreds of jobs there, keep them in our area and in our country as opposed to going overseas. We have a whole innovation using technology for those large workplaces that are a net positive to our economy, not a negative.
Okay, thank you, Eric. David.
A conversation that we needed to have before COVID, during COVID, and now as we rebuild our economy is what is the role of government? And I think no more clear is the Liberal Party's perspective as the answers of Mr. Moquin earlier, talking about looking after businesses, taking care of businesses. Businesses need our help. Now, this is the difference between the Liberal Party approach and approach like the People's Party of Canada. The Liberals will talk about these things as though it is their job to be the parent of businesses, whereas a party that focuses on good economic policy will actually do it. Once again, I'll say as a business owner myself, there's nothing that will look after, take care of, or help me more, or my employees, than to give a more simplified, lower tax system that allows me to pay my employees a higher salary, and that will help them in turn.
Okay, thank you. Dennis?
I'm fine, Greg. Thank you.
Okay, and Jeannie?
Yes, I would just like to emphasize that growing up on a farm with 10 kids and seeing the example my mother set for us, looking after the children, looking after our farm, you know, no one could have learned the value and dignity of hard work more than me, and I had a great example from my parents. And that's why, though, I'm wondering about this conservative approach. If hard work has such value and dignity, why, when you give a 50% subsidy, why aren't you giving the 50% subsidy to the businesses so that they could increase the wages of the people who come back to work by 50%? You know, raising it from $14 an hour, for example, to $21. Why are you subsidizing the businesses so that they can basically get a profit on the backs of their laborers? Because then basically they hire someone for 14, they only have to pay them 7. You know, if hard work has such value and dignity, why not reward it with a living wage, a wage that would allow them to have the stuff that professionals take for granted?
Okay, thank you. All right, so that brings to close question number 6. We'll move on now to our 7th question. And here it is. What are your thoughts on climate change locally and abroad? And what will your party do about climate change? And we will start with David.
Great, thank you. I'll start by saying this. Okay, I accept that climate change exists. I do not, however, accept that there is a climate crisis. For millions of years, the climate on the Earth has changed, and we've been tracking climate change in Canada for quite some time, and we are constantly, for decades, given these doomsday scenarios of what's going to happen, and those things never pan out. I'd like to remind everybody that we have this ball of fire that's 150 million kilometers away from us that is so powerful that it controls the orbit of Uranus and Neptune that's 4.5 billion kilometers away. It's somewhat arrogant for us to think that we are the cause and we are able to control the climate in some major way, shape, or form. What the climate alarmists would suggest that we have to do is to drastically change the way we have our way of life, our economy, the way we live as individuals, the way we travel, and basically put us back into Stone Age. Because if it is truly a climate crisis, as some of us would say there is, then it's only the most drastic of solutions that's going to solve that. The PPC does not take that position. And while certainly steps can be taken to reduce our carbon footprint, I'm not saying that nothing needs to be done, we cannot and we must not approach the subject of climate change from the perspective of climate alarmism.
Thank you. Dennis?
Thank you, Greg. I'm a spouse, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather. I too have children that I care about, and caring about their future is very important. I have grandchildren, and I want to ensure that they breathe fresh air, have greener areas to play in. The climate change is, whether you agree or disagree, is upon us. The last 3 weeks of 40-plus degree weather, there's a reason for that climate change. I, as probably everybody that's out there, does not want to see our children going to school with hazmat suits on and everything falling apart. The approach needs to be a team. The approach needs to be now. The approach needs to be conducted in a proper manner. And I understand the physics, and I understand the speculation, and I understand the concerns. But when you get to climate change, I would hope that everybody realizes that it's not coming in the future, it's here. And with the waterways, the greenways, the promotions set out by various municipalities in the province of Ontario and the federal government need to address that soon, or in my opinion, we're going to be way behind. And we've always taken the lead as one of the best countries in the world, and this is a very, very strong concern. We need to address that now.
Thank you. Jeannie.
Okay, well, I think, I'm sure, David, that it's not arrogance, it's not a fantasy, it's pretty much science, and it's most of our scientists. But I am from the Green Party, so I won't go into a lot of detail about our platform on the dealing with the climate emergency, because everyone will say, oh, it's just the Green Party. Of course they're going to say that. So instead, I'd rather draw our attention to a couple of quite conservative entities who emphasize so clearly through their activities that climate change is ongoing. One is, first of all, the Financial Post. They had an article a week or two ago, and they noted that in this last 6 months, there have been 88 new clean tech and renewable energy companies that have started up on the Toronto Stock Exchange. That's $3.09 billion in equity financings during the first 6 months of 2021. Even ARC, a company that's investing primarily in oil and gas, was taking out stock or developing clean tech and renewable energy. So, the actions of the market speak louder than words. Second, the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, a group of 2,000 municipalities in Canada, just came out with a report in which they asked for $2 billion from the federal government over 3 years, followed by at least $1 billion annually to deal with to deal with the climate change and to mitigate the effects of climate change. They asked for things like for wildfire, drought, flood prevention, and restoration of wetlands and shorelines. So there you have two quite different entities, the Toronto Stock Exchange and 2,000 municipalities in Canada, the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, both agreeing that climate change is here and we have to address it.
Okay, thank you. Eric?
To set a context, Greg, I think nationally right now, as we have the Liberal government propped up by the NDP and supported often by the Greens and even the Bloc Québécois that are pitting one part of the country against the other, the West versus the rest, when it comes to that. And I think we have, and I'm proud of our environmental plan that was released several months ago, that was independently vetted to meet our emissions targets without doing it on the backs of everyday Canadians by the ever-escalating carbon tax and sending billions of dollars to Ottawa. I think our plan is reasonable. I think it's economically sound, and I think it's based on the principle a lot oftentimes of getting government out of the way to unleash in research and technology and investment there in our oil sands. I think of zero-emission vehicles, the red tape that's around on that, carbon capture and storage being another, and small nuclear reactors. And the biggest problems you talk about with a lot of these businesses is the red tape and the details and the taxes that they pay that are stopping their growth, stopping their creating jobs and the dent that they can make in our environmental footprint. Greg, one of the things we talk about is we have a very detailed, comprehensive plan to address climate change in our platform. Again, I'm proud of it, but one of the things that's in there that we don't talk enough about is when we talk about phasing out, some parties want to do our oil and gas sector in the West. It is a unicorn theory in my mind to suggest that everything's just going to change overnight. What we'd be doing instead is we would be getting our oil and gas from countries like Saudi Arabia, China, Iran, Venezuela. And I don't think, number one, they have good environmental principles like we do, and talking about the things that the debates in those countries that we're talking about, and their human rights records very often are, frankly, lacking would be an understatement. So we have a plan to make sure we do our part in Canada. We have a tariff program. If China, Venezuela, these other contributing countries don't play their part, they will pay tariffs to bring their goods into our country, and we'll make them address climate change collectively, not just one country pitted against the other. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so David, do you want to add something?
I do. We just heard it, Greg. It's pretty much science. Well, then tell me, why has the science been wrong so often? 1990, there was a prediction that it would, in the United States and Canada, increase by 6 degrees by 2020. In 1989, it was predicted that we'd run out of oil by 2020. In 2001, it was predicted that there'd be no more glaciers on Mount Kilimanjaro by 2020. This climate alarmism does so much harm and does little good. And it's the type of thing that we're hearing from the Liberal Party today, that we're going to have our kids in hazmat suits. This kind of fear-based policy making that went into our approach to the pandemic must not be the template that we use for moving forward beyond the pandemic, addressing things such as climate change. Now, so far, I'm the only person on this stage who said that I do not believe that there is a climate crisis going on. I'd certainly like to hear if the Conservative Party believes there's a climate crisis or not.
Thank you. Dennis?
This campaign is crucial. The Liberal Party is ready to continue the climate control. Large investments will be happening to protect the cleaner environment. Ambitious plan is in place to accelerate the climate action. More jobs, cleaner community, less pollution, zero emissions on vehicles by 2030, support the training of 1,000 firefighters to combat the terrible fires that were as a result of pollution air in the West. These are all ideas for some, but they will be factual and will come to fruition with the Liberal government.
Thank you. Jeannie?
I'd actually like to address Mr. Duncan's a reference to his party's climate change plan. We're talking about a party where recently 53% of its membership voted to deny climate change. They said it was not a reality. So even if Aaron O'Toole himself believes in his climate change plan, it doesn't have widespread support of the party membership. So it's hard to believe that they'd actually be able to implement this plan. Second, if you're thinking of the difficulty of whether or not this can be implemented, again, it claims that it would be impossible. The Conservatives' plan is to scale it back to only 30% emissions decrease by 2030, which most scientists agree will not be able to keep the temperatures significantly low enough to maintain our environment. The Green Party's plan does show how it can be done, and I can quickly give one example. The Nation Rise wind project produces 10 megawatts of electricity. The power dam produces 100. So this one small project in a corner of Finch produced 1/10 the power that the power dam does. So it is possible to switch to renewables and then to use the Green Party platform to shunt it along through a national electricity corridor.
Thank you, Jeannie. Eric?
I wanted to clarify the record, but happy to do so a few times tonight through the Green Party. What was debated at the convention, I was there, was not about climate change being real. That was actually already in the document. This was an amendment to change certain sections of it. So again, we've been very clear that we need to tackle the environment, we need to tackle climate change and make a difference. To David's point, it's an issue. We all have platforms, we're all talking about ways of addressing it. I don't get into the overall, is it this word, is it that word, progressive versus liberal versus whatever, I don't get into that. The details are we've got a balanced plan that meets the targets that were set up for years. It's been independently verified, and I think at the end of the day, it is a responsible plan. I think it is one that can lower our emissions without doing it on the backs of everyday Canadians. And Greg, when we look at the carbon tax here locally, we don't have an option of jumping on a subway here to go home for me tonight in the cotton mills or to go to South Mountain tomorrow when I'm out door knocking. We have to drive a car. We need to work on zero emission vehicles and getting our reductions done. Our family was in the trucking business for years. We did a lot, not through government regulation and red tape, but because of the research and innovation that was there, we lowered our fuel consumption, we lowered our emissions by smart investment of government getting out of the way and making a good return on investment. Our plan's mature, it'll get done, and it's realistic, and I support it completely.
Okay, thank you, candidates. Unfortunately, because this has been a lot of fun, we are going to have to stop the questions and move to closing comments. We could have gone on for some time. We left out some really important issues like mental health and child care. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get to those issues tonight. Maybe we'll schedule another one in a couple of weeks. I think not. So. See how that goes. So now we'll be going to our closing comments, and as said at the beginning, we'll go in reverse order. So David, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. At the last election, I cast my ballot for the Conservative Party of Canada. As I indicated, I had been a member of the Conservative Party for a long time, and I'm not doing so this time around. And if you're in that boat where you cast your ballot for the Conservative Party last time, I'm speaking directly to you. Go on Google, go online and look at yesterday's Maclean's magazine. Aaron O'Toole was featured in an article entitled, "Aaron O'Toole, Socialist Crusader." It was talking about his views on unions, but it goes beyond that. He supports a carbon tax, which implicitly means he does buy into the climate alarmism theory. I put the question to the Conservative candidate in this riding if he believes there's a climate crisis or a climate emergency. And his answer was, I don't get into this word or that word. But the reality is that the way we frame the problem is how we set our priorities to come up with a solution. If you're looking to vote for a party that does not believe there is a climate emergency, that still would prioritize addressing the environment and climate change, but in the context of the other priorities, then the PPC is the party that you should be voting for. As we move out of this pandemic and take a look at the economic damage that's around us, we need free markets, free speech, civil liberties, and Canadian unity to be the rails that guide us towards the future. 2020 and 2021 have been pretty much a write-off. Vacations canceled, education of our kids put on hold, family functions missed, savings depleted. Now is the time for decisive action, and we need to send decisive members of Parliament to Ottawa. When I was studying at McGill University, I remember reading a line in a newspaper article that struck me during the 2000 election campaign. When Conservatives behave like Liberals, the voters ultimately end up voting for the real thing. And so my message to all of you who voted Conservative last time, like me, ask yourself if the party that is truly differentiating itself from Justin Trudeau's Liberals in substance, is it the Conservatives, or would you find a better home with the PPC? Right now, the only party that is pursuing the most important Canadian values of free expression, free markets, civil liberties, and Canadian unity is the People's Party of Canada. On September 20th, I would be honored if you would put your vote, cast your vote or put your X next to David Anber among the ridings that will be sending a PPC member to Ottawa in the next Parliament.
Thank you. Eric.
Thank you, Greg. I want to thank the Chamber and your TV for putting this on tonight. I want to thank David, Jeannie, and Dennis for a civil and spirited debate, which I think is great for our riding to have a clear choice of where we're going on September the 20th. I've been honored to serve as our community's Member of Parliament for the past 22 months, and I'm asking for your support again. COVID has certainly changed the game, as has been mentioned. 2020 and 2021 have been write-offs, to say the least. But I think this election, there is one option to get change in this country. There is one party that can defeat a tired, and I think, frankly, arrogant government in Ottawa that called an unnecessary $600 million election because they thought people weren't paying attention in the midst of the summer after they just got their vaccine and they could cruise to a quiet majority government. We've seen over the course of the last 2.5, 3 weeks, a momentum build for Aaron O'Toole and our Conservative Party. We have a full, detailed platform that talks about Canada's recovery plan. 165 pages that covers every issue that we talked about tonight and many more that we didn't get a chance to do that. We have a plan that we can be measured on. When we say something, we mean it and we follow through on it. That is, I think, a standard reputation that our Conservative Party has. We have a government in Ottawa today that talks a good game, and I've said this in the House of Commons before. They get an A for an announcement, but F for follow through. Saying you're going to spend money is not a result. And we've seen that, if it be on housing, if it be on our budget, if it be on environment, if it be on mental health. And I think even from a personal perspective, of ending the discriminatory blood ban for men who have sex with men. Today, their platform came out, and after breaking their promise for 6.5 years, they didn't even bother to put it in. 6.5 years in, we have a tired government. It's time for change. We're getting momentum. If you're driving out through any part of this riding, you're seeing a lot of blue signs. Blue signs don't win elections. Signs don't win elections, but it shows momentum. Every single community, every single town, every single part of this riding is hearing our message. It's positive, it's constructive, it's about moving forward, it's about respect for the individual, it's respect for small businesses, respect for healthcare, and can get the job done. So we have a choice of one option that can replace this government, and that is the Conservative Party of Canada. Who's going to create jobs and get our economy back on track? Who do you trust to get Canada out of this recession? And if you're voting locally on your candidate, who knows the issues, can get to work on day one, and be fired up every day to make a difference for our community and our country. I ask for your support as a Conservative candidate on September the 20th. Thanks for the invite here tonight.
Thank you. Jeannie.
I'd like to start first just by thanking everyone for coming and participating and acknowledging our virtual audience as well. I think ultimately the election comes down to questions of vision and integrity. We've heard a lot, first, the vision aspect. We need vision to address the climate change, but we also need vision to be able to access the thousands of well-paying jobs that will emerge from the clean tech and green tech industries. As I was saying from the quote from the Financial Post, tremendous amounts of money are being pumped into this. But I would suggest that we can't access those opportunities if we're still denying the problem, as the Conservative Party is doing in their limited plans to fight climate change, and as the People's Party is doing in totally denying it. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if we do want to fight climate change, we have to begin now, and we have to take it seriously. We have to get our emissions down to 60% by 2030. In the midst of this crisis, we do have cause for optimism. COVID has shown how well we can work when we work together. Unlike our neighbours to the south, we're smart enough and humble enough to listen to our scientists and take the reports on climate change seriously. Humans, too, are capable of incredible ingenuity. Advances in technology over the last 10 years in solar, wind, and battery have brought a zero emissions future well within our grasp. It's not a fantasy, but we have to plan and act now. That's what will allow us to secure the good green jobs of the future for this area, and will allow us to establish the training programs we need. It'll allow us to mitigate the effects of climate change for cities like Cornwall by planning for drought, wildfire, and floods. And it'll allow us to keep our temperatures from rising and preserve a livable planet for our children and our grandchildren. And that's why I'm asking you on September 20th to please vote green. Vote for Jeannie Warnock.
Thank you. Dennis.
Thank you, Greg. Well, finishing the fight against COVID-19, we need to do it together. A home for everyone, help to find a home of their own, give them a chance. Better health care for everyone, keeping Canadians healthy and keeping them as healthy as we can. A more resilient economy, a cleaner, greener future, accelerate the climate control action. Reconciliation, walk the shared path with the original legacies. Make everyone pay their fair share. Big banks are the wealthiest Canadians. Create safer communities. Deliver $10 a day childcare and more childcare spaces. Build a fairer Canada for all. If I may, earn your trust and confidence. I promise to fulfill the mandate that I am talking about. While we may not agree always, I promise to listen and respect your position. I'm ready to learn of the issues that are important to you and share those concerns. I want to anticipate the issues that are important to residents of this riding. I want to provide genuine and sincere service to all. I truly care for people. I want to be part of a team that cares about people, especially in our riding. Again, I am a spouse, I am a grandfather, I am a father. I have children that I care about. I have grandchildren. I want to ensure that they be able to breathe fresh air, have green surroundings. I'm ready, willing, and able and experienced with my background. I'd like to thank all of the frontline workers at this time, healthcare workers and teachers. You are the best. On September 20th, send Dennis Maquin to Ottawa. You will not regret it. This is my goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that brings to an end our all candidates meeting. I want to thank the 4 candidates for putting your name forward, as well as the 5th candidate who was unable to attend tonight. That is a significant effort on your part to make yourself available for the political process. Not an easy job. I trust the viewers will find your answers helpful in selecting the candidate that best represents their views and vision for the future. Voting is on September 20th. Advance polls open on September 10th. For more information on ensuring that you know where to vote or that you are able to vote, please visit Elections Canada or call our local elections office at 866-288-1317. And they will ensure that you have whatever you need to cast your vote. I want to thank Your TV for joining us tonight and broadcasting the event. And a very special thank you to my colleague Shannon Tierney for her work in making this event a success. Good night, everyone, and go vote.